everybody. I am Marina and I'm your host at Embossed. Embossed is a podcast I've created to highlight women with amazing paths of success here in Chicago. Last year, I set out to interview the only 40 female CTOs in the city, and this year I've expanded to female CEOs and women in politics and government in Chicago. I'm excited to share these interviews with you, and I hope you contact me at www.unbossed.io or email me at marina@unbossed.io. Hope to see you soon. Amanda Lanner is CEO of Jellyvision and has been a key figure in driving the company since its founding in 2001. Her focus at Jellyvision is one of the company's strategy, improving processes to better scale operations, partnership development, and customer acquisition to continue fueling the company's growth. Amanda was named CEO of the Year at the Moxie Awards in 2014 and 2015, Woman in Tech in 2016, Woman of the Year for the Chicago Rotary Club of 2018, and was recognized as 2016's Industry Champion by the Illinois Technology Association. She has been profiled in the Chicago Tribune and Crain's. Amanda is also active in Chicago startup community, serving as a board member of Spot Hero, Knowledge Hound, Now Secure, and Popular Pays, as a council member of the Zell Fellows program at Kellogg, and as a member of the Chicago Next. She also serves as a super mentor for the Chicago Incubator's Impact Engine and Techstars, where she also was named Mentor of the Year. Amanda is quick to laugh and enjoys a good cupcake. Thank you, Amanda, for coming. All right, this is Marina, your host at Embossed. Thank you for listening. Today, I have an amazing and special guest, Amanda Lannert. I actually worked with Amanda at Jellyvision, and I'm super excited to have her over. She's awesome, and I will tell you, I'll put her bio. It's extensive, it's long. Just know she's amazing. A woman leading Jellyvision, a company that is a technology company. And I will add your bio, Amanda, actually, in the podcast. But thank you, Amanda. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here with me. Before we start our awesome conversation, tell me, I know you do your bio all the time, but just tell me a little bit about you as a woman, as a CEO, as a mother, as a person who takes care of others as well, as an employer. When you were younger, when you were a little girl, did you ever think you'd be here where you are today? Or where did you think you were going to be?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, no. I didn't grow up ever imagining a career nearly as cool as the one I have, which is why I constantly tell people to think bigger. I was the kid of academics. My dad was a doctor, knew exactly what kind of doctor he wanted to be from the time he was 14 or 15 years old, and did only that until he retired, nearly 50 years later. My mom was a nurse turned a stay-at-home mom for most of my sort of upbringing. And so I grew up in a house where you were expected to go to college, you were expected to do well in school, you were expected to have, extracurriculars and sort of academic excellence. But in many respects, a lot of my upbringing was about answering the questions, not asking them. And so what I wanted to do was get a lot more school, get a JD, MD, and write public policy for hospitals about what to do with like abandoned embryos or policies around euthanasia for terminally ill patients and things. I thought sort of like the line between like ethics and science and morality and all the complexity around policy, that's what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up, because my dad did ask us to think. And I was like, that sounds pretty interesting, and I'll be in school for 200 years, sounds like a plan. Then I spent my junior year abroad at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, where instead of being like a nerd in a grind school, I barely went to classes and traveled from the Highlands of Scotland to Morocco, from Portugal to the Czech Republic, which is what it was called back then. And I basically majored in beer and boys for a year. I learned so much more in traveling the world as a kid with a backpack where I had no money. I would sleep in train stations to save money on youth hostels, but just had like my eyes opened in a really, really profound way. So all of that fun and all of that learning was more formative than all of my other years of education combined. But I came home and said, Dad, great year, but I'm behind in my pre-med. I need a 5th year of college at my bougie New England liberal arts school to get my pre-med credit so I can go to medical school. And he said, that's great. How are you paying for it? And when I knew I was off the dole, I had to do a life reflection of I have no skills, no network, no experience whatsoever beyond babysitting. What is a person to do? And I kind of thought advertising, because it seems like you don't need to know anything from the outside. You can kind of come in from the ground and work your way up. and I couldn't be a consultant because I didn't know anything to consult yet. And sort of was an East Coast kid who didn't want to go all the way to the West Coast. I kind of thought I want to sort of stop in between. Well, it looks like there's this big city, Chicago. I didn't know anything else about the Midwest. And when you're looking at advertising in Chicago in the 90s, it was Leo Burnett. And I sort of applied January of my senior year of college, one application, one job, one offer, graduated on a Friday, showed up at Leo Burnett on a Monday. So incredibly not entrepreneurial, like nothing, very academic, very practical, very narrow in scope in terms of how I launched myself out of, off of my parents' dole and into the world.
Wow. So I feel like a lot of women have this debate nowadays as well, especially leading a technology firm. And I think this is relevant for you, especially given that the story that you told me is like, is education versus work experience? Some women have more of one, other have more of the other. Where do we stand today, and how do you think about it when you hire for your company?
Yeah, I don't prize education now as much as I was taught to growing up. I now think that so many of the most valuable skills in the workplace are things that didn't exist when you were in school 10 years ago. Curriculum can't keep up. So I think, it's important to get a good, well-rounded education so that you can learn how to learn. Because really, it's not what's your expertise, but what can you figure out? Because the jobs we're going to be doing in 20 years don't exist today. And if you think your company is going to spoon feed you the skills you need to be adaptable and employable in 20 years, you're wrong. So I think really earlier stage education should just be about learning how to learn. And so that you can graduate as a figure it outer, like I can figure it out. I don't have to know it. I can figure it out. And then you'll have an interesting career. I do participate in a program at Harvard Business School every year. I do continue to invest in both formal and informal education. But I believe as an employer that oftentimes your trajectory through school may say more about your parents and their expectations than you and your choices. Mm. And so I'm very open to what have you learned on your own? What have you taught yourself recently? What have you figured out? What new skills did you acquire through your own sweat equity? That's more interesting to me than did you go to Harvard and Northwestern and things like that. So I don't mean to be like the total contrarian to how I was raised, but I am the total contrarian to how I was raised when it comes to employing people. And also I said to my oldest daughter, I said, look, you're about to launch into college. I will pay for your college education, or I'll give you $250,000 to seed your first business, your choice.
What did she choose?
She wanted to go to college and party and with a friend and, live her life, which is very much what she's doing. But it's like, pause and think. The options are there. And I just wanted her to start challenging assumptions about the path really early on.
That's amazing. How does one woman, and I'm talking specifically about women, but also men that may not have a traditional pedigree, highlight those experiences so that it can catch eyes like yours and other leaders in the industry?
Yeah, I think people fail to realize the importance of a good outreach when you're trying to highlight yourself. Like, the most forgotten fact in business is that we're all human, right? Companies, don't buy from companies. People buy from people. Companies don't hire employees. Hiring managers are people, and they're looking for people. So I think that the idea of putting forth yourself and saying, I'm a hardworking, non-dramatic, self-motivated person who will grind, get stuff done, and make your life easier, so much more compelling than the perfect credentials where you don't know if someone's going to be, a pain in the butt to work with. And then you throw in and I make baked goods and have a great sense of humor. People want to work with people. So put your best foot forward, put your whole self forward. And basically, if you're all these wonderful things, say it. If you're more than your credentials, say it. You can hit somebody up on LinkedIn. You can send an email. You can get a reference in. You got to do the work. But if you're just sending in your resume, you are just your resume. And if it's not strongly credentialed, neither are you. That's ultimately, people don't hire resumes. People hire people. So sort of humanize yourself and let the recruiters see you.
And I totally
way fit.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's definitely the culture at Jellyvision that I experience of the people culture. And you're quite popular in the Chicago area to run a company that is culturally, I want to say a step forward, perhaps. Is that how you see it? Or is that how they talk about it?
I think the reality is Jellyvision sat down several years ago and sort of realized two things. One, we are, and always will be only as good as the people we have. Our brand is not immune. Our product doesn't sell itself. We don't have an algorithm that is beyond bulletproof. It just isn't. And if we have a lapse in talent, we will have a lapse in our business. It's just that, like, cause and effect. And the second thing is we realize, like, as companies grow and scale, we start treating each other like corporate entities and not like people. And there's so much of a lost humanity in HR as companies grow. And it's because you start to imagine things that can go wrong instead of imagining and trusting that things will go right. Mm-hmm. So policies creep in, and and then things become a wreck. It's a wreck instead of a job description, and we just, like, lose the humanity. So we really tried to say, Harry, the founder of Jellyvision, and I used to have debates. Do you treat people the way you want to be treated, or do you treat people the way they want to be treated? And we would, like, that's the kind of debate we would have, is it, we define what high standards are, and this is how we would want to be treated. Like, in terms of parting ways, I wouldn't want to be walked out. And so other people are like, no, I'd want to be walked out right away. And it's like, you just sit down and say, how can you create as much room for people to have dignity and humanity and self-respect and grace, and then run your business accordingly, where you don't knee-jerk every time something goes wrong, and you kind of, like, believe in humanity and assume when you hear something wrong, assume that there's possible good intent behind it. Like, probably I don't know the whole story, versus going clamp down, knee-jerk react, assume the worst. And people, I've found, reward that. If you lead a company where you treat people like children, they'll reward you by acting like children. And if you say, you're an adult, I assume you know more about this problem than I do, they'll bring forth the best possible ideas to solve your problems. So it's sort of those overall ethos of, like, companies don't have to suck, was, like, really, like, we're going to grow without sucking. And that's how we talked about it. But it is very much just, like, humbling thyself to how powerful and important employees are. And I mean all of them.
Absolutely.
All of them.
You do this extremely well at Jellyvision, and I'm super excited to have that experience. I wonder, what would you say to the market trend, or the market leaders, or people that say things like, this is a skill because this is a skill, or the type of company she runs is because she runs it that way because she's a woman. And just disclaimer about that, I'm saying that, but I don't believe that. I know you're extremely analytical, you're operationally effective, and you have so many hard skills that I don't even want to do the comparison between female and male. But there is that perception that you run this company that way because you're a woman and you have a vastly female leaders in place.
Yeah, what's really exciting is I can tell the truth that Jellyvision was founded by a man.
Yeah.
And what's best about Jellyvision is what's best about our founder, Harry Gottlieb. So, like, a dude started this stuff. Graceful leaving policy was written by a dude. So I reject that wholeheartedly. And I think, if anything, if there are stereotypes at Jellyvision, it's that the women are steely and the men are sensitive. And so I don't think about this as being, like, kind-hearted in business and, like, being motherly in business. I think about this as being effective in business. When you're in a talent economy, which we are all in a talent economy, the fact is, reducing fear from workplaces creates more shareholder value. The fact is, diversity in workforces leads to more shareholder value. Again and again, it's not because we're going to group hug it out. It's because it's about business value, which is, my job in the first place. So I do think it's the right way to get there. It's a wonderful way to get there. And I'll be honest, there are a lot of really successful companies that have questionable cultures right now. Like, Uber was not known as a warm and fuzzy place, but it created transformational technology. Google, question mark, they're kind of silencing their employees right now, question mark there. And so I don't think it's one size fits all in terms of creating enterprise value, but I do think psychological safety leads to more innovative ideas. People are more willing to stick their necks out. And it also makes for a more pleasant workday. When you're fighting for people to show up for you instead of showing up somewhere else, I do think it can go a long way.
Nice. Well said. I do believe that wholeheartedly, and I think companies that do have the type of mentality go further than others. I think before we jump into, I think we were talking, I definitely want you to talk about advices that you may have for women. We talked about this a little bit, right? There's a few key things that you wanted to specifically mention. And I think what we are noticing is, so one of the things that I learned from you first of all, when it came into Jellyvision, and we always had these conversations about how do we create more diversity, or how do we, add more diverse employees at Jellyvision. You told me something that I think it was striking. It's like, I know why I have so many women at Jellyvision. And I don't know if you remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if you remember the answer. It was like, because I have a mostly female executive team. Do you think that applies also for diversity? And is that the key to really create a diverse talent in a company?
Yeah, I think that anytime someone says, hey, we care about DEI, so we're going to go start a sourcing program out of colleges and high schools, I really think it's horseshit, and I think that they're kicking the can down the road. In my experience, which only I can speak from, Jellyvision has real gender diversity and really lacks in racial diversity. We are not as diverse in the city in which we primarily compete, which is still Chicago. Our demographics are more tech than Chicago, and we believe they should match Chicago. And so the way to do that is to not just start to source candidates from high schools in the south side of Chicago, although that's important and we should be doing that, and we are working with Embark and things like that. The reality is we have to look at our board of directors and C-suite and change that first. Great talent wants to see themselves running the company, and I mean literally see themselves.
Yeah.
And so when Jellyvision, when I first realized we were 50% female, we had submitted ourselves to Cranes for best places to work. And I was reading through the application and I was just like, I think that's unusual. I'd never thought of it. So without strategy, without investment, without sourcing from primarily female schools, without developing a pipeline of talent, we'd gotten 50%, gender diversity, including in the C-suite. Nice. And so I was like, all the programs that we're doing right now will be magnified, amplified if you look in the C-suite and it is as diverse as the company in which it is, the city in which we compete. So I don't think we have a pipeline problem. I think we have a promotion problem. And if we focus on solving our promotion problem, then the best talent in the world will say, I too can grow here. Yes. I too will have my ideas listened to. I too can make change here. And if you look up and you see an all white, even if it's like female, that's diversity, right? I've been told you've been progressive around gender, be progressive around race. And I was like, on it. And I know where to start, which is in hiring SVPs and above who bring that valuable, diverse perspective. So I do say this to hold myself accountable. I say this to really say this is where the change is going to happen, where people feel more safe at Jellyvision, more like they're going to drive at Jellyvision. That is a huge part of it. It is not about having a very racially diverse class of interns. That's important. That is not going to drive the systemic change in 3 years that can happen with diverse company C-suites.
And I think you hit my very exact next point, which is we have a promotion problem. Is there anything you see women are doing or not doing that could either, alleviate the problem? So let's take some ownership over it. Is there anything that we can do to take on ownership to do that? Is there anything that companies, employers, market should do in order to help promote more women?
Yeah. I think there are kind of several things. I'll just start riffing here, more of a brainstorm, because I certainly don't have the answer. And if I did, I would have written a book so as many people could have the answer as possible. But the first thing first is have more audacious dreams. If I could go back and tell little Mandy any bit of advice, it would be just dream bigger, expect more. Having big dreams doesn't mean you'll attain them, but I have never met anyone who's on their way to changing the world who didn't have intentionality behind it. So don't aspire for the next promotion. Don't aspire to make some low-level amount of money. aspire for greatness, and you'll get there faster. 2, really, really internalize it is hard for everyone. Everyone gets their noses thumped. Everyone gets a ton of rejection. And so often the no isn't about you or your company or your work. It's about them. The fund may not be in a place where they can write a follow-on check, so they can invest in you right now. You might be too similar to a deal that they just did, or a deal they once lost money on, or something like that. Chris Gladwin, the CEO of CleverSafe, who sold his company for over $1 billion to IBM, tried to raise a Series D where he got 105 no's in a row before he got a yes on 106.
Wow.
You must have grit. You must have resilience. 3rd thing, don't care if they think you're a bitch, ask for more.
Nice.
You think I'm a bitch? You think I'm a bitch? Sorry. I've got an idea and I'm driving it. And like, if we just like, don't be careless, but care less, and then pull your sisters along. Just like grasp arms, and like as you're shoving your way through the door, pull 3 with you, and then they'll make it easier. And then they'll be like, she's not a bitch. She's actually just really smart. I mean, all of those things sort of perpetuate itself. It's really, really easy to be first. It's easier to be 1 of 10. just like, it's just easier. There's a lot of intentionality in investing in women and founders of color. There's a lot of intentionality of promoting leadership. It's a great time to be audacious. And if you get a leg in and a leg up, pull people with you. And it just creates safety and normalcy instead of you being like the odd duck. You've got room. And I'll say like sort of a last thing, just to be totally blunt. I am the token female. Like, I'm the token female on boards. I'm the token female. People write to me because they say, hey, we need diversity with blank. And I was like, couldn't you just say you need a great board member? Like, why do you like talk to me like that? Why do you just say you need diversity? But then I go, never mind, I'll take it. I'll lean in and I'll show you. I will be there. And then for the next opening, I'll make sure we place another woman as best as I can. I am unafraid to be a token. It does not hurt my feelings. It's great opportunity. I sit on 5 outside tech boards because of it. Those boards make me smarter. They will create wealth for my family. I learn more. My network is better, all those kinds of things. And I'm not going to be hurt that you think I'm token, because I won't be token for long. And I'm talking like this to be like, get this narrative in your head, look in the mirror and amp yourself up, because not many people are going to do it for you.
Nice.
And then when it doesn't go to plan, call a girlfriend, go have a glass of wine, cry it out, and then tomorrow's a new day.
And we've sure done that, our fair share of doing that. That's awesome. How does one get on a board in Chicago?
So a huge part of it is find founders you like and start to be really, really helpful. And then the second part of it is, I just need to say this, ask to be on a board. I would like to join your board. When you think about a board, please think about me, because very often people will say, you're great for advice, you're great at this, but they won't make the connection. Plant the seed and be willing to ask. The worst thing that can happen is that they say no. I don't value your opinions enough. You're like, great, then I'm going to stop giving you my free advice. And another thing, like if you want to get on boards, instead of saying, I want to be on boards, ask yourself this: what can you give? What are you so smart at? What can you coach on? What is the point of view that you bring to the table? What have you done particularly well or particularly not well, so that you have coachable moments? I did this, it didn't work, let me tell you about it. Unbelievably helpful. Almost more helpful than like everything was up and to the right and perfectly executed. Learn from me. You're like, I don't get it, but you're like, man, I ran into a brick wall, 85 miles per hour. This is why. This is what I should have done. Way, way more valuable. So I think if you invest in yourself and getting good enough at something to be valuable, you will likely end up on boards or have chances to get on boards and be known as an expert. And if you don't get those things, you'll still be better at your job. You'll still have more value. You'll probably still get more money, and you'll probably feel more interesting, because like the more you get good at something, the more you have mastery, the more you like it. And it's probably just like good intellectual development.
I love talking to you, because I remember you giving me this advice, and I never heard it as clear as today for some reason. But you told me one time, like, make a list. You want to go be a speaker, make a list of your failures and talk about those really, really hard. And I think that's what you refer to when you're talking about, like, this is the shit that I learned when I really just did not go well. And that is way more interesting than just the perfection or the image of perfection and what goes right?
I had this moment where everyone was talking about imposter syndrome, and I was like, I don't really have imposter syndrome in the way you think, meaning I will blaze into any room. I will speak up. I will act like I belong there, but then I go home and have insomnia at night, and I just the whole night I'm like going through what I said. I'm like, I can't believe you said that, you idiot. Why don't you ever shut up? Why can't you ever be quiet? And so I have like delayed effect imposter syndrome, and I said that, and people are like, I can't believe you just admitted my deep fear. And it's like, just by saying it, I'm like, it's normal. Some people deeply have, residual anxiety and really question their life choices every single time. But I don't. I guess I'm too old to bullshit. Right? I'm tired of posturing, and I had a really formative lesson. I can tell you. I was talking to a woman named Sharon Schneider, who was the CEO of a company called Moxygene that had gone through Techstars. And I walked up to her and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, I'm going to do you a solid and tell you the truth. It's not going well. I'm really worried that we're not going to get our financing, And so then we started, and other people came over, and we're all like war rooming how to get this, what investors can you call, and what do you do? How can you get a bridge? Can you get a line from the bank? And it was the most amazing thing. And it's very Chicago, by the way, to not be full of it. And to be kind of honest and like try to be helpful and, try to get help back. It's a very Chicago thing. But I remember I just like the way she handled that. I was like, never BSing again. It's not easy. Not everything goes to plan. And I don't think I'm doing anyone in the world any favors by saying it does. So I just that's like the Sharon Schneider effect for me.
I love that. It takes I don't know, what does it take? It takes self-awareness. It takes courage. Where do we stumble? Like, as a young professional, I know I'm not always super aware of that moment where like I need to be authentic here, or I can be vulnerable in this situation. Like it's hard. It's like putting yourself out there. You're worried about what people are going to think of you. You're worried about your employer. You're worried about your career, your promotion. There's so much at stake. How do you go about it? How do you just put it all out there?
Well, I think that they're just two strategies, because I don't want to say it's like it's who you are. It's not. Like some things are learned. Like being a public speaker, the first talk I ever gave, I was an assistant account executive at Leo Burnett, and I had to give a talk in front of 500 people for the Kellogg company while they were eating cereal for breakfast at some conference. 500 people is a lot of people when you've never done a public speech before. And I stayed up the whole night practicing. Now, the reality is nobody listened. Nobody cared what I had to say. I shouldn't have been worried at all, but I was terrified. And when I got up to the podium, they had me on this sort of like little like bench thing. And my legs were shaking so hard that the podium thing I was standing on was shaking. And they're like, is she going to fall? Like now I'm like, whatever thing. And it's just practice. So to kind of get back to it, I go to something I've already said. Don't be careless, but care less. Say it as a mantra. Say it until you believe it. I can't control the world. I can control the way I feel about the world. And you're not important enough to make me feel bad about me.
Awesome.
Meditate on that. And then do your homework. I don't really wing anything. I read over an hour a day about my industry, about business, about leadership, about the future of work, about, I was reading about like Second Life and the emergence of these games and Roblox and stuff like that. As like, I've been studying Bitcoin. Like I'm super getting into like crypto just so I can understand what does it mean for the world. And when I pick a topic, like I go on Clubhouse and I'm following on Twitter and I'm reading blogs about it. But be a student of industry. One way to like never be silenced is to deeply know your shit. So I read, the Information, Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Inc. magazine. I read Twitter. I just read a ton so that I can back up with fact what I'm saying. I can say, well, did you hear about such and such is happening? I read like private equity blogs so I could see what companies are trading, things like that. I talk to employees and customers. Like I try to have an informed opinion. So care less and do your homework.
Love it. Amanda, who got you on Clubhouse?
Chris Deutsch. He's one of Chicago's most active angel investors is basically the equivalent of a human puppy, like nothing but high energy and excited about everything. But he managed to write, I think it's 30 checks during the pandemic year. And he's like, you got to come on Clubhouse. And he's super into it. I'm not very good because I don't actually want to engage with people. I just want to listen quietly and be left alone. And you're supposed to be on stage and ask questions. And I was like, I just don't want to engage anymore usually by the time I get onto Clubhouse. But I have now, I listen to Tiffany Haddish, who's a comedian, give advice, business advice to Black entrepreneurial women. And I was like, I listened for over 2 hours. I could have listened forever. She was so funny. And it was just like women coaching women in a community. I don't always get to hear that authentic of a voice. And she's talking about like IP ownership and how to be aggressive in pricing. And like, I never would have had that moment were it not for Clubhouse, where I got to hear that intimate of a conversation. And it's like, yeah, I listened to Bill Gates, but he was not as interesting as a bunch of Chinese engineers talking about crypto. Where I was like obsessed in that room too. I'm like, man, the access to this brain talking about this like leading edge stuff. That's what I like. I like to lurk in super random rooms. Like I don't really want to be in the Chicago startup room. I got that room. I want the weird rooms, just like fun facts, new things. That's what I like about Clubhouse.
I think you're a nerd at heart, and I'm so happy about it. Which makes me think of Clubhouse, Zoom, all these like new ways we engage with each other nowadays, given COVID. What strategy have you implemented with your company that you think have worked really well, and perhaps some that have not worked in this time?
So I think the thing that worked most is we were really, really quick in saying, give grace, create space, and prioritize physical and mental health. We were really direct about it. We really meant it. We, closed the office on certain days when, it was early on. We're just like, we're closing the office. Everyone take this day off. Really trying to create time to not work. We implemented something called Winter Fridays, where we said no Zoom at all on Fridays and no meetings after 1, just trying to mix up day parts. What we didn't do well, though, is I still think too much of Jellyvision pre-pandemic just got executed on Zoom. I don't know if we've really challenged, like, is a meeting still a meeting? Can work be done asynchronously? Why are all cameras on if you're not talking? It's exhausting. Like the Zoom stare-a-thon brain drain has been proven. It is more exhausting to sit in your box and just physically be locked in. And so we are now moving forward into the next phase of like really starting to challenge, is it a Zoom or is it a phone call? And we're piloting an app that tries to encourage walking meetings over the phone.
Yes.
With like built-in features where you can like, automatically take notes and transcribe the last 15 seconds and save it as a note and stuff, just to get people moving, to really prioritize physical and mental health. So on a level, we were pretty quick in being like, we get this is weird. We get you may have kids crawling on your laps. We get you may be really, really lonely and not able to function right now. What we're trying to do now is create more wins at work. Sometimes your mental health could be improved by being like, I killed it today. I had a big win today. I was a hero to my team today, and I'm really good at my job. And we've got to switch into that by making work less exhausting, less sort of perfunctory, challenging how work happens, and really celebrating micro and macro wins. That's sort of the focus of our strategy moving forward.
So there's a few things there, like, I would like you to talk about, and then we can definitely talk about also like what do you see for the future coming up of like remote work, or generally like employees being not as before. Jellyvision has had to reinvent itself, or at least reinvent their product multiple times, and I see perhaps some parallelisms here between like how do you reinvent the way we work, how do you reinvent your company and a product a little bit. Are there any sources that you're going to are there any people you're listening to that are at the cutting edge of like what is work now, what is a Zoom meeting, what is a meeting in general, and like how do you reinvent a thing that has been honestly put in place for, I don't know, hundreds of years?
Yeah. So I think we go back to the stuff that makes our work great in the first, our products great in the first place, which is like even behavioral science. So BJ Fogg, who is one of my favorite behavioral scientists, has this sort of model for creating behavior change. And to simplify too much his model, there are two axes. One is how motivated are you to change? And the second is how hard or easy. And the more motivated and the easier the change is, the more likely you are to change. The less motivated and the harder the change is, the less likely you are to change. And too often companies just say, care. We're gonna lean into care. Like, we know we should be challenging whether it's a meeting. But it's altogether different if you just do one tiny little hack, which is you say Thursday from 3 to 3:30. We want everyone in the company to be reviewing their calendar for the next month and slacking each other, hey, we're in this meeting. Everybody at once, analyze calendars, get into Slacks, challenge your work. So you've created like a system for doing it and an expectation for doing it, where instead of you wanting to challenge it right now, but somebody else is in the middle of something, like, so we're trying to make it easier, trying to create systemic processes for people to challenge work rather than just planting the idea. Everybody wants work to work more. Everybody knows 8 hours of Zoom are somehow soul-suckingly exhausting in a way 8 hours in the office was not. We also know we like to wear sweatpants and not commute and be around our families more. So how do we take the lessons and start to evolve, create systems that make it easier for employees to enact the change that they are motivated to enact? When we're scheduling meetings now, like my vision is that we have a meeting. Is it Zoom or is it a phone call? Ask. Can you do it without locking yourself into a chair in front of a tiny little dot camera? Can you do a walking meeting? And instead of just saying you should do walking meetings, every time you set a meeting, can we ask you to probe, can you get by with doing a walking meeting so you can get up and stretch your legs and get some energy? Like, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to bring to bear. And we're trying to bring it bear before everyone is vaccinated and leaving their houses.
I love it. There's so much that is ingrained and almost, I want to say almost like we cannot even see it. Like, even the fact that, the workday starts between 8 and 5. People have different hours and different schedules and function. There's some people that function better in the morning, people that function better in the evenings. There's so much that is unexplored in the space. Where do you see us generally? Where do you see company like just completely missing the mark? And where do you see the work environment, the general like working of people going in the next months or years?
Yeah, I think that employers aren't aware of how much there's going to be a change. I see a lot of hunger to go back to this idea of measured 40 hours. And that 40-hour work week was invented when people were on assembly lines because they figured that is the maximum amount of time you could work before errors started to be made. 36 hours, you had too many changeovers, you were losing productivity. 44 hours, an error spike. So 40 hours became defined when people did the same manual labor over and over and over. Now we've moved in, and there's so little manual labor involved in the traditional tech company, which, all companies are tech companies now in certain respects. And we haven't challenged that notion. And even like Jason Fried, who's so good at challenging how work happens, like killing meetings and allowing for more deep flow stuff, he still clings to the 40 hours. And I think what companies have to do is get good at measuring the difference between activity and productivity. And because we can measure 40 hours. We can't determine like, what's enough productivity to have an ROI? So I say things like, there was recently a person who kind of went viral for having a job at both Facebook and Google and got fired by both when he got caught. And I was like,
how long did he last though?
I care if you have a second job.
Yeah.
I don't think I like to tell people what they do outside of work. I think I'm responsible for setting a reasonable amount of work, so quality and quantity is determined in fair value to Jellyvision, and then what you do in your spare time is your own business. Like, I think we have to say we don't care. Our position is, if we can get the quality and quantity, like, we don't go, oh, how much more would we get if you weren't burnt out from having 2 jobs? Like, that's not what we ask. We say, are we setting the bar high enough for quality and quantity, and then letting you live your life however you want to live it beyond that? And so I think that's the hard thing. Here's the reality. We talked about the future of work. I do think that there's going to be a roaring 20s. I think that there are 2 things that have to happen. We have to be safe, and then we have to feel safe. And I don't think they're going to happen at the same time. I don't think that like we're going to get to like herd immunity and then everyone's going to be running out of their houses. I think we have to like ease back into it. That abrupt shutdown, I think, is going to be a little bit more of an ease back. I could be wrong. But suddenly, after not having freedom, for being oppressed, which can range from I was deeply scared for my health to I was really annoyed and inconvenienced. Like wherever you are on the spectrum, we did not have freedom for America. That's like freedom. We're gonna go nuts for freedom. But I think what we're gonna value is travel and time with family and friends and restaurants and shopping and touching things and not commuting and being in the office 5 days a week. I think that work is happening right now because people have nothing else to do. They really can't go anywhere else. And the second we're like, the smell of freedom, you buy. I think that there are going to be mass sabbaticals, mass quits to take leaves of absence, so people can throw on backpacks and just feel free again and go see people and go eat in restaurants without fear of death or like fear of like being socially irresponsible. Like it's like I can't eat in a restaurant, but I feel like a creep because I don't want to like spread COVID, like my super spreader Sunday dinner. Like people miss that. And so I think employers who are going to be like, I need these hours and I need them to happen in this space. The value prop isn't there after people have been almost traumatically locked down for more than a year. I don't think it's there. And I think we have to say, how can we strike a balance about a new pact? How can we strike a balance where we get what we need, but you get time and flexibility and the ability to like go places, which is what you need? How can we keep you in the workforce and keep that talent going? Because without you, our business suffers. How can we find like new ways to have this pact? Or we're not going to win the talent war. I truly believe that. I think people are going to be like, I saved a ton of money because I couldn't go anywhere, and all I need to do are 10 vacations in a row. Bye. But,
I'm thinking about
no, we have our one-on-one. We have our status meeting. It's like, no. So I might be being potentially a bit radical here, but I really do think that's what the Roaring Twenties means. Nobody is clamoring to get back on the Metra or the L and be in an office in pants 5 days a week. They're clamoring for different things, and when they have options, work is going to ratchet down in the queue in a pretty big way for at least a year, I think.
There's another side of that, which I'm wondering about. There's people like me that feel like some amount of work is actually quite fulfilling. But I do agree with everything you said. There's one point though that I would like to hear your opinion about is like, what is an office that is not a bunch of desks? Right? What is an office that is like, I want to be with my coworkers because I want to feel that culture, passion, that same goal, type of fire and energy, but I don't want to go there to work. I'm going there to feel the culture of work or get ideations done or brainstorming and be with people and have those moments that do happen that you get a lot of value from. Do you have an opinion about that?
So I'm thinking about it, and I'll tell you what my great thought was, and then I'll tell you the feedback I got, so you can see why my great idea wasn't great. But I thought we're going to evolve from having desks for all employees, where you're there 5 days a week, to say we're going to go to hoteling, which is if you want a desk, it's there. And if you're someone who really wants a desk 5 days a week, we will reserve a place where you can leave your stuff. But otherwise, if you're in like 2 to 3 days a week and want flexibility, awesome, kind of first come, first serve. And we're going to set it up like this. We're going to have the library. Quiet workspace where you can get a desk where nobody talks. It's a room where nobody talks. Then we're going to have talking workspace where if you want the vibe and the chatter, it's there. We're going to have cafeteria style seating. So you can just go flop and end up sitting next to 3 weird people, not weird people, but 3 different, mismatched people. But it's like if you didn't book a desk and you just need to flop somewhere in between meetings, there's like flop space. And then fourth is collaboration space, where 1/4 of the office is not for seating people to work independently, but for seating people to work in on-sites, in collaboration rooms. Like it's all just a bunch of different rooms and configurations. Where
I love this idea. There's nothing wrong with it.
The reason what people said is the feeling of not having a place to go with your people at work felt a lot like lunchtime cafeteria the first day of high school, where you're like, I don't know where to go with my tray. Where are my people? And there's very much like the glue at Jellyvision are your coworkers. You like to build relationships with people. You like to develop sort of space or team-based cultures. And the idea of it just being a mishmash of people felt a little bit like not as fun as like being like, oh my gosh, Marina, what'd you do this weekend? You know, how it's the familiarity was more important than I realized, where I was like, mix it up. New day, new space, new coworkers, like get to know people. That was not as well received as I had thought. So we're working on how to create, you know, our strategy, we call it flexible first. And that doesn't mean we put a desk for every person in an office building anymore, where we expect on Fridays, virtually no one will be in the office. We project like 20% of people will be in the office on Fridays. We're hearing a lot. There's interest in an office. We will have an office, but we expect people to be in it 2 to 3 days a week. And up to 20 to 30% of our population will have moved out of Chicago by the time this pandemic is over, or we'll be hiring outside of Chicago. So then it's more important to have on-site space. Come meet us, come have a team meeting, come do your annual kickoff, or come have a quarterly check-in, and have space where people can comfortably, you know, dump their stuff all day, but just only be there for a couple of days and then not again for 3 months.
I love that. I have to say, I didn't think about it like you. I'm very much like an outgoing person, so I would have gone for that. Be like, hey, let's go, let's meet new people. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I got a lot of like, not really, Amanda. I'm like, okay, all right, we'll keep trying. I'll keep trying. You know, try something else. Maybe we can set up like quadrants of like, you know, salespeople ish. Go here if you want, but you can cross lines or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
What's going to happen to companies that force employees to go back to 8 to 5 commute? Because I feel like a lot of companies are doing that. They're like, get a vaccine. We're going to open up. You're going to come back into the office. We need to see you. We need to hear you. We need to check. We need to time in and time out.
Yeah, I get shocked by how well I think they're going to do, because what they're telling their people is, we don't trust you and we don't respect you and we need to babysit you. And in my experience, when you do that, people reward you by acting like children. Well, they'll push and they'll edge and they're not motivated and it's not their work and things like that. Yet a lot of companies are going to do it. I think it ranges from incredibly short-sighted to profoundly violating to tell people who may actually, for personal health reasons, feel uncomfortable being outside, saying, I need you to get back to an office where you may feel unsafe. I don't get it. But I always say, like, really, if talent only knew their power, vote with your feet, quit. It's going to be amazing how quickly that changes. But really, the power is in the people. And if they show up, then there's no incentive for employers to change. And a lot of people will do that. And let me be clear. Some people really do miss the office. Some people really miss the routine. They like being an adult, sitting in an office versus, you know, having kids on them or the pets on them, or they like the change of scenery so they can say, and now I'm done with work. I'm leaving my stuff here and I'm going to my non-work life. Every different strokes for different folks. But I think we've, as a nation, suffered. Let's not let this crisis go to waste. Let's like reinvent work, please.
Who said that? Do you know? Like a woman said that. Let's not let this crisis go to waste.
Yeah, never let a crisis go to waste is a long-standing business thing. Like, it's been said so much, it's almost right. God. I mean, I can Google it at some point and be like, somebody said it. It wasn't me, but it's like it's come up a lot during the pandemic. Never let it. Margaret Muller of the Executives Club of Chicago just gave that quote to me, so I'm probably thinking of Margaret. Never let a crisis go to waste.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. I love that. Awesome. Let's do outros because we're almost at time. What is a book you have gifted the most, or something that you've read recently that you really, really loved?
The book I've gifted the most is because I gave it to something like 15 executives at Jellyvision. It's a book called The Culture Code. It is an unbelievable Dan Coyle book where I read it and I was like, this is what I want to be when I grow up if I were a company. And like the underpinning is like how important psychological safety is at work. That like real safety leads to audacity. And I just read it and I was like, this feels like everything I want. And Adam Robinson recommended it to me, and then I turned around and bought a ton of copies. The book I've gifted most of my personal life is a book called A Little Life, and it's Hanya Yanagihara. It is not a happy book. but it is one of the most beautifully written books, and the story, a very hard to read story about an abused young man, has stuck with me for years. It's like one of the most like potent books I read, where I was in another person's life, in another person's world, breathing beside them on a very difficult journey. And I was like, wow, the power of a book to transport is so like profoundly real in a little life. One of the best books I've ever read.
Awesome, thank you. What is a book you would write?
Would write. I probably wouldn't write a book, but a book I could write with humility, I should say that. It's something like Stories for the Slog. I often storytell for a living. You've probably heard my story about the one-legged skier, Bert the t-shirt guy, Captain Dave. Like, I have my like stories, but I also have like business stories where like this story happened. I remember the story about, you know, the Karen Wine size call, the this and that. Like, I have like stories that I go through and retell for a living, realizing that sometimes it makes a lesson someone else's, whereas if you just tell them what to do, it's yours. Like, when you can embed it and make it visceral and palpable and memorable, and then applicable in the applying a story to your own problem, it becomes yours. So I would write a book where every chapter is just a story, like a lesson about business, a takeaway about business, not, you know, synchronous, not this sort of like linear progression, but just like story, with the idea that I'm just trying to impart stories and lessons that hopefully stick, so you don't have to make my mistakes. So Stories from the Slog is a book I could write. What I would write a biography about some undersung hero, where it's like the book purpose would be to help somebody see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and I would write a book about somebody else. That is something like, if I were to write a book, I would do that kind of thing.
That's awesome. What is in it for you to write a book about an unsung hero?
I really like people.
That's good.
I really do. You peel back the onion on literally anyone, and you're like, huh, you are fascinating. You are fascinating. Everyone is really fascinating if you give them more than 2 seconds. And so I just like it's like, you know, as a student of people, we study people for a living. I study people for a living. I try to understand people for a living. I mean, it's so much of my job. So it would just be like sort of like the hobby of like people understanding, and then getting to be like, how cool is it to sing an undersung hero's praises? Someone who's just like doing great for great's sake and not for, you know, fame's sake. It's like awesome.
Yeah, I love it. What does it mean to you to be unbossed?
You know, the word unbossed, like when I first heard about this initiative of yours, it was like freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't feel unbossed. I have customers, I have employees, I have shareholders. You know, I am accountable and frankly somewhat bossed by almost everyone. I was like, I am bossed by my family. I'm bossed by my dog. If I don't take my dog in the morning, she pees on the rug. I don't know that I feel like I would sit down and be like, I'm unbossed, and I relate to that. But I do relate to, I am responsible for having a vision, and I'm responsible for driving that vision. I'm responsible for getting people to join behind that vision versus for joining myself. And that's kind of the aspect of unbossed I relate to, but I feel very bossed, Marina. I was gonna be honest. I'm like bossed galore. But I do feel I've gotten to a place where I'm supposed to have a vision. I'm supposed to drive that vision, and I'm supposed to get people behind the vision versus being like, whose vision am I picking, and joining that. So
I think you would love to hear the story of why I call this unbossed, actually. So the team at Jellyvision that I actually was managing had a Slack channel called, you know, team_unbossed, meaning like I was the only one not on that team in the Slack channel. And that triggered something, and I was like, no, I want my people to be able to tell me anything. And so I made it my leader mission at Jellyvision to create trust, create relationship. And that channel was by the time I left, that channel was barely used versus the channel where I was also in. And so I felt so proud about that part of this little thing that I called it unbossed, because I always want to remember the fact that I want my employees, my people, anybody in the organization to be able to tell me, even if I'm their boss, to tell me anything. no matter what. There shouldn't be any.
Okay. That's how you end it, because that was really great. That is a great story. And be like, all right, everybody, take away that is unbossed, instead of being like, I don't get to do what I want to do. I have to answer to everybody. Listen on that. That was like that's a really great and powerful idea and story. And it's important. It's a really important and valuable leadership, a skill and idea. Love it.
Okay, great. Well, it's time. I know you're very busy. I love having you. You're like my soul sister. So I really appreciate you. We'll talk.
I adore you. I can't wait to work for you someday. I mean it. You're the best. Thank you for having me.
Work with me. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, lady. Bye-bye.